Thank you for joining us for this sermon podcast from United Christian Church of Austin, where no matter who you are or where you are on life's journey, you're invited and welcome. This sermon for Sunday, March 11th, 2018, continues in our Lenten sermon series, Letting Go, Living Into, with letting go of quiet, living into peace. It's a reflection on a reading from the prophet Ezekiel, chapter 13, verses 9 through 11. If you enjoy this podcast and would like to learn more about our open and affirming ministries at United Christian Church, simply head over to our website, www.uccaustin.org. Thank you.
Our reading today comes from the Hebrew Bible, from the prophets, from the book of the prophet Ezekiel, chapter 13, verses 9 through 11. Let's listen for a living word from God in these words from Ezekiel. Thus says the Lord, my hand will be against the prophets who see false visions and utter lying divinations. They shall not be in the council of my people, nor be enrolled in the register of the house of Israel. Nor shall they enter the land of Israel, and you shall know that I am the Lord of God. Because in truth, because they have misled my people, saying peace, when there is no peace, and because when the people build a wall, these prophets smear whitewash on it, saying to those who smear whitewash on it that it shall fall. There will be a deluge of rain, great hailstones will fall, and a stormy wind will break out. Friends, God is still speaking to the world. May our hearts be open to listen and to respond. Amen.
Good morning. I see you all made it here today, bright and early. I would like to first express my thanks to John for giving me the opportunity to join in this Lenten series of letting go and living into. It was a fun challenge, and it was exactly what I needed to hear this week. It's funny how that works. It's like God's involved in this. Just to recap the series for you, John began by preaching letting go of famine and living into feast. Then Carl preached about letting go of distraction and living into rest. And then last week, Nikki preached about letting go of law and living into grace. Let me have a little grace from my sound system here, okay? And this week, I'm preaching about letting go of quiet and living into peace. Peace and quiet. I just need some peace and quiet. How many times have any of us said that after a hectic day or a hectic week or a hectic year? But as those of you with kids or pets well know, the two do not always go hand in hand. I had a boxer once named Rev, and while he was a puppy, he was always underfoot, wanting to be petted, wanting to go for a walk, wanting to play. It was just always something. And then one day, I suddenly had a little peace and quiet. It's like, this is so nice. But it's a little too quiet. So I went looking for him, and I found that he had torn up his brand new, very expensive bed. It looked like it had snowed in Texas in the summer. So peace and quiet, while both are good, there is a distinct difference between the two that I would like to talk about today. So let's start with the scripture passage that James read from the book of Ezekiel. Now, some of you may be wondering, why in the world did I pick a passage from the Old Testament, from the Hebrew Bible, for a Lenten study? After all, Lent is 40 days long to mirror the time that Jesus spent in the wilderness preparing for his ministry. And it ends on Easter after the march to the cross and resurrection. why not pick a New Testament passage? But when I heard the theme was holding on to letting go of quiet and living into peace, the passage from Ezekiel came to mind as the perfect example of doing just that. So let's look a little closer. To give you some background, Ezekiel was a Hebrew prophet, and by prophet, I mean he spoke the hard truths. He lived in Judah during the time of the Babylonian conquest, about 597 BCE. And in fact, the following year, he was in the first group of exiles that got shipped off to Babylon in order to crush the Judean culture. But let's rewind 5 years before the conquest. Ezekiel was preaching, prophesying about the dangers facing his people. Yet no one listened. Instead, they were listening to false prophets who were saying, there are no problems. There are no dangers. We're at peace. So don't worry about anything. Yet the peace was a false peace. You say peace, peace, but there is no peace. By being quiet, by not saying what is going on in our world, in our institutions, in our families, and even within ourselves, are we contributing to a false peace as well? Are we living Facebook lives where all of our posts are happy, joyous moments without any mention of the storms that are raging inside of us? There may be small examples of quiet, such as the well-known and highly practiced rule of never bringing up politics or religion at family gatherings in order to keep the peace. Yet I wonder if trusting each other enough to have those deeper conversations would lead to a deeper type of peace, a truer peace. There are also larger conflicts that are plastered over with quiet. I think of the 1950s, for example, with the expectation that everyone lived in Ozzie and Harriet or Leave It to Beaver life. But then the civil rights movement broke open that quietness in hopes of finding a true peace for everyone, for all the beloved community, as the Reverend Martin Luther King would say, black, white, brown, didn't matter. This past Wednesday, I learned about a new kind of quiet. I was here at the Lenten study that John is leading around TED Talks, which TED stands for Technology, Entertainment, and Design. And in case you're not familiar with them, TED Talks are about 20 minutes or less and are given by these incredibly interesting thought leaders over all types of fields. This week, we heard from E.J. Wilson, who described his experience of going undercover in a white supremacist alt-line group by creating a profile as a white supremacist. He did this because he was curious about the people who were attacking him online for being black, because they seemed very intelligent, and he didn't understand why they thought the way they thought. You could tell that they were intelligent people, but they were living in some kind of alternate reality, it seemed. He came to find out that, in fact, they were living in an alternate reality. It's something called digital echo chambers, which I had never heard of. He described it as this: that same target marketing algorithm that feeds you more of the products that you would like to buy also feeds you more of the news you like to hear. I had been living in an online universe that just reflected my worldview back to me. Interesting. It's a new type of quiet. It makes it very, very difficult to build bridges and have those transformative conversations with people that think differently, because you don't realize there are people that think differently until you're confronted. But letting go of this quiet is needed in order to live into peace. Everyone suffers. Even the white supremacists that Wilson got to know online and was surprised to feel compassion for. It's a fact of life. But it is how we react to that suffering that makes all the difference. How do we find peace, true peace, to navigate the storms of our lives? Now, Ezekiel was concerned for his community, but during this Lenten season, I want us to reflect not on the peace of the world, but the peace within each one of us. Have you ever met someone who seems to have an aura of peace, who just exudes that certain type of energy that makes you feel better by just being around them? It's not that their life is perfect or quiet, but it's a peace that they carry within themselves. I felt that listening to Emily sing with Sam playing, just a sense of peace. But I've also met two people in my life that I would describe as exuding peace. Most recently, I met a Christian named Daoud Nasser in Israel, Palestine, when I went on a trip 2 years ago for a seminary class I took. He lives on land that's been in his family since the Ottoman Empire. It's a big hill just outside of Bethlehem. Now, his hill is surrounded by other hills. You can stand there and look at them, and each one of those hills has an illegal Israeli settlement on it. The government and the settlers themselves have been trying to force Daoud out for years, but when they blocked the road leading to his land, he simply walked. When they cut off his water, he dug a well and put out rain collection barrels. When they served demolition orders for his buildings, he dug caves. And when they pulled out his olive trees, he invited the world to come and plant more trees with him. He calls his land the Tent of Nations. As you walk in onto his land, there is a big rock right here beside the path, and it says in several different languages in big letters, "I refuse to be your enemy." So despite the tension that I personally felt in that conflicted land, I felt at peace, just sitting and listening to Daoud talk about his theology, about his life. And it wasn't lost on me that we were sitting right outside of Bethlehem. It wasn't lost on him either. I can only imagine what the people must have felt in Jesus' presence. I mean, after all, here we are 2,000 years later, still talking about him. The peace that I felt with Daoud must have been just a small taste of what it was like to be with Jesus. In John 14, Jesus is recorded as saying, "Peace I leave with you, my peace I give to you. I do not give it to you as the world gives it. Do not let your hearts be troubled, and do not let them be afraid." That is true peace. That is the peace that can withstand the storms of life. It is not whitewashed over, but rather a strong, protective wall that has been given to each of us. This is the peace that we can live into. Think about this gift, really internalize it when we pass the peace later in this service. We're not saying, "Hey, how are you doing today?" We're saying, "May the peace of Christ be with you, with each of you." So during this Lenten season, I encourage you to let go of quiet and live into peace, into true peace. So may the peace of Christ be with you. Amen.